wanted to give an update on the city builder that I showed in a previous video, just to kind of re-summarize. So this is a tool that uses GPT to give you lots of city building ideas and help you construct a whole bunch of it, while also giving you the power to go in and make things the way you want it to be. Um, just to give you a little preview, here's an example of a city I've spent a fair amount of time on, with lots of different buildings, and inside the buildings there are characters, um, and there are uh, even the ability to, if I can find one that I've done this with before, the ability to kind of like chat with people. Um, and you'll see there's lots of images, and these are all coming from Midjourney, as well, uh, as kind of a way to put it through. So for instance, here's like a faction. So it has buildings and occupants. It has factions, which are kind of groups of people who do things. This is a robotic faction, um, and they have their own personalities. Here's Rusty, a grumpy old automaton, and here's an example of a chat, and I'll show a little bit how this works. But here I'm chatting with them, and this automaton is grumpy, and this is a maze city, so there's lots of mazes, and I ask about how to get through it, and it says, "Oh, I don't want to do it," but you can convince him by saying there's an important robot to fix because that's what he cares about. Uh, Midjourney, of course, always gets language wrong, but this is a fantasy city, so this is how they spell those words. That's that's how I've decided it goes. So I'm going to start over. This is part of the uh, on llm.ianbicking.org, the Layercraft system. I'm going to use one locally here, um, so I can show how some changes are made and how you can do this. I'm going to make a new city here. So we're going to go back. And what I did between the last version and this version is I actually rewrote pretty much everything. And I created a general purpose kind of way of doing these interactions, and then a specific one for city making, which is a bunch of these schemas. Um, and the schemas, do have lots of prompts. So these prompts are the things we send to GPT, right? We send, like, let's give us a bunch of different kinds of city types and ask for them back. And then a city period, right? That's kind of like the technology. It uses city types, so you have to choose a city type first, and then it'll get you a list of city periods for you to choose. So I'm going to run this on my local version. So we'll make the city maker here. This is just a cached version. I'll make use of it, or I'll re-roll it here. So over here you see the prompts as they go by. This is what's being sent to GPT. System prompt, which is pretty generic about what you're doing, and then we act as though those prompts that we sent are messages from the user. So the user says, here, makes a numbered list of different kinds of city types, and then we just parse this numbered list into a list here. So let's choose one here. Let's see what would be fun. Let's do a Gothic city, sure. I added this as a new property to try to get the technology be a little bit more cohesive, to kind of give it an era. As you can see, like Macabre Metropolis is obviously very much part of this as well. So these are all using the ChatGPT 3.5 API. The previous version used GPT-3. The real advantage to changing to the ChatGPT API is it's much cheaper, 10 times cheaper, and it's much faster. So before, where I kind of would go through and manually decide, "Oh, okay, now I'm ready to get some options. Now I just have it very aggressively go out and just pick a bunch of options. And if I want to throw them away or redo them or something, that's fine. So yeah, here's some options. Another thing we can do is we can ask GPT-4, which works just like GPT 3.5, only it's, I guess, fancier. It's also slower and more expensive. So I'm defaulting to 3.5, and I've been very happy just using 3.5. But it can be interesting. And it does, I think some of these have a little bit more variety, or they're kind of a there's some interesting things here. Let's see, Dreadstone. That's a good scary place. Gonna make a creepy city here. And now it's going to do the backstory, which is kind of like the real personality, a bunch of the details of this. Um, the mist never clears, and there's lots of thunderstorms. Um, let's see, what are some other ones? That's cool. Uh, dark government. Um, There's some. I'm gonna again re-roll it with GPT-4. These beginning parts really like form a whole lot of the city. So we do want to get them right and do them well. Uh, you can go back, you can change them. That won't change anything that depended upon them because you've made choices and you kind of like come together, and other things like depend on how these things fit together. So we don't redo anything, but we can add things to it later, and that'll affect future things, or you can continue to re-roll things based on that. Um, as you can see, GPT-4 is substantially slower, and yeah, it does have better quality results. I have found in a small bit of experimentation, kind of more interesting, uh, you know, bone rattling thunderstorms that electrify the night sky. That's a nice turn of phrase. Um, and let's see. Oh, ghostly energies. Yeah, there should be something positive about all this negative stuff, right? Maybe it's got ghosts around, but you at least get some nice lighting out of it. Um, and let's see. Yeah, supernatural origin. That's good. Okay. So now we've have this, and everything that was depending just on these properties can now start to get filled in. So there's actually several, right? There's factions, neighborhoods, and protagonists. All their dependencies are all done, and so they can all start getting generated. Um, and we'll just do a little bit of these ones. Right. So the Order of Blackthorn. Sure. We'll just take a bunch of these, and then when we say done, then anything that's based upon them can also start filling in. So here we see children. So a faction has faction leaders and members. It also has some other kind of details, which are maybe less interesting. But as I filled it out for Vale, I went through this and I was like, well, when you go to a place, you need to have they need to live somewhere. There should be a logo for the faction. Um, so there's a lot of little details that once I was really making this into a more finished product, I realized I wanted all those assets. Let's see. I'll just sure these are all great. We'll say. Um, Now here are some extra kind of additional properties that are coming onto this. Um, and these are filled in fairly automatically. One is the chat prompt. So this is, a reasonably short description. But when we actually want her to chat, we need a little bit more information, a little bit more to like fill out how she should act. That also includes some of the context of the whole city. Another thing that's nice here is that, it makes, like she's always choosing her words carefully to achieve her desired outcome. That's not really in this prompt. GPT is just making that up. It's an interesting way to say it. But now because it's made it up and stored it, that'll be a stable part of her personality when you interact with her. And then we also have a description. Um, so I decided Midjourney works great, and I like it. The one problem with Midjourney is that it does not have any API or anything. So I can make this prompt, but it just kind of sits there. To try to improve on that, I have another window open here with a place where I can put some stuff. And then I have also created an Apple script uh, shortcut. So when I highlight this text and I press my key thing, it does a copy, it switches over to there, it types this in, and then puts me back. It's a small thing, but it made it like way more reasonable for me. I was spending a lot of time like fiddling around with the text and just get it transferred over, and this process made it so I can make literally hundreds of pictures for Veil Veil. I think I made 400 pictures or something, which was not easy, but it wasn't that hard either. So let's try chatting with her. Um, oops. So one thing is it doesn't know anything about us, right? It's this pure generic. You can see here again. Here's the prompt, um, and and I say hi, and it doesn't know anything about me. So that's the nature of this thing is that it really should say like at least what I look like or why. So I'll say I have a. So this is like a chance you can kind of make things up and it'll go along pretty well. Can deliver you a truckload of cadavers. Since apparently we're in kind of a cruel. So, we can go through this. It looks like the picture has come out. Again, if you look at this description here, which I copied, is again makes up details about her. It's actually surprising that it had any racial diversity. One thing it loves to give everyone blue eyes, which is something I'm going to have to like work on. And blue eyes usually mean you're white, and therefore it comes out with white things. Here it actually didn't, which is surprising. I don't know, that first one kind of has a nice dramatic feel to it. All right, we get the full one. I've used another extension here that makes it easy to upload to Imager, which is an easy enough place to put it. Paste it in there. Oops, that's not the right place to paste it. Paste it in here. I can see. I can just undo things there, and it disappears truly. But now she has a picture. She has a little bit of a personality, and you can go through and just keep doing that over and over and over. You can decide which kind of like faction logo. Which one was this again? This is the Order of the Black Thorn. So we can look at the logo and say like, oh, that's a cool looking sounding logo. We'll go and generate that as well. So kind of fill these things out. All right, so we won't go through the rest of these. Here's one where you can see like how factions might interact with each other. I thought it'd be cool. These are never very interesting. I feel like it doesn't say anything that you couldn't infer from them without these statements. So an experiment that, all right, well, a couple of different places. All right, what would be a cool one? I thought that there was one that was ghostly, right? Um, which one's the ghostly one here? The houses float above the ground and the people are rumored to be ghosts. That sounds like a fun place. And then we have some landmarks, which are places that just kind of exist without any people in them, and a few places. So one thing that I found to be a useful pattern here is I know that there's going to be people inside these buildings, and at this stage I come up with these types of people. So right, a medium and ghost hunter and such, and then they'll be used to generate the people that are inside of it. Um, I had a more generic approach previously where I said just give them each job, such as, and then gave us a couple of generic job examples, and it just wasn't. It didn't do it nearly as well. It didn't, yeah, gave everyone the same kinds of jobs and wasn't nearly as interesting. Now I've separated out owners and visitors. I should get rid of that. Visitors really aren't an interesting distinction from these other people. It should just be one group of people who are associated with the building. Yep, we'll just I'm gonna add a few of these people just to get a little thing to work with later. Um, they work very much like the faction members do. It's not really different. All right, so these buildings do have descriptions, right? So here's a ghostly manor, and it actually has two images associated with it. One is a street view, and another one is a platform game level, which is something that I find kind of interesting. I'm gonna generate one of these. Ah, you can see Um, Midjourney has a very straightforward banning of words, so apparently the seductive vibe of the logo got it banned, right? So we'll just say an ominous vibe. All right, and where this is Street View, slightly different. Um, and you can change aspects of these prompts as well down below if you want to have different kinds of, you want to give a certain style or something, right? This is just digital art. I find it keeps it from going too wild. Like it's a certain kind of pattern, so I've used that a fair amount. But it's pretty neutral, and you can be much more specific if you wanted to. You can give a certain artist or something to really make all the portraits like kind of go together, and that could be an interesting way to go. Um, let's see what some of those pictures. So this is an example of like how these platform things work. Um, it's much more lo-fi, but it's fun because it feels like a place, right? And that's a neat thing to have. Um, Knockers are banned. Yeah, there's all sorts of. GPT loves to talk about people putting their uh, hair up, tying it up in a knot, and it also refuses to use the word tied. um, Iron uh, doorbells, we'll say, I guess. I don't actually have a good alternative name for that. Um, Another thing I want to show here is, so protagonist is another kind of character that I've just started to play around with. So we have people that belong to certain places, but they're kind of like trapped there in a way. And protagonists are like the people who just like go all over and can do anything and make things happen. Um, so again, this one uses kind of a template that asks them to go through. People have a goal. The call to adventure. This is kind of based off of the hero's journey. What is the thing that takes this person out of their regular life and into a life of adventure? Um, so this isn't very filled out, but and then this is another thing I want to show, which is the plotline generation. Um, so to make this world alive, the next thing is things have to happen in it. And while I don't have things happening in it, this is like the beginning of that framework, which is the idea of like telling stories that might be occurring here. Um, so yeah, someone in someone's family is becoming shows signs of becoming a vampire. Um, we include some factions here up front. And then what we're doing here is we're going to have a list of candidate characters and locations related to the plot. And these characters are pulled from the ones that we've already created, but it can also invent new characters that are kind of useful for this particular plot, which I think is a nice pattern to have, right? You want to reuse people, but when you want the right kind of person for the right kind of place, you want to like pull them in. Um, so let's see, someone's covering up a secret, enforcer, a bunch of different people who are doing things. Then we have locations. Locations aren't that interesting, but these are like the again, it gives GPT then like a smaller set. Here's what's happening. Here are the actual characters that are involved, especially if you have like 100 characters, which is not unreasonable at all. Um, I think I have 300 characters in Veil. Um, so get yourself a few characters, get yourself a few buildings, and then you have this opportunity to then just have the events. And part of the idea here, and I don't, this is where I'm getting on the edge of what I know if it'll work well at all, is that there's this like kind of timeline, and then maybe some of these events happen, and you the player might be inside those events, like as the events happen, then you might be able to kind of see the effects of them or see that they've happened. And then also like there's kind of like a ticking time thing that while the events don't have to happen, maybe you could affect things. Like if you don't do anything, this is how things are going to progress. And if you do something, then maybe what it would do is it would come in and say like, okay, now what are the new events that are going to happen here? Um, it's not activated, but I've done another plotline process specifically for murders here, and that one I found you didn't want to tell a plot, because if you tell a murder plot, GPT will like jump in and be like, cool, I'm gonna invent a detective and I'm gonna invent some like a conclusion and all sorts of different things and gets way ahead of the story. So the way the murder mystery one works is it only sets up the beginning of the system, and then once that's once the facts are laid out, then you can think about like what actually happens. Because the typical way a murder mystery happens is a bunch of stuff happens, someone gets killed, they find out someone is killed, and then someone needs to figure out who it was. And there's a bunch of different people who have motivations, so that's part of the thing is to like figure out who the motivation is. Something about the murder was secret enough that no one could tell. But we don't tell it like a story. We just tell it as facts. And then out of that, you can pull a story and you can decide who knows about things and how that goes. Um, and then we have just some of this like interior stuff. Here's like a description of Dreadstone. This is um, in Vale. This is like the intro text um, and a description of the factions. Again, I had this as a list where you just had here's a list of factions, and it didn't seem that fun. So I made it instead like a paragraph form to have it linked out. You can redo those things, but it works out fine here. And then lastly, I wanted to show how you can add something new. Um, so what I was planning to just add here, it doesn't make it as much sense here, but let's say let's say it could make sense, um, is like neighboring kingdoms and stuff, because that's often an interesting um, thing to know a little bit about. You don't want to actually build all these other like cities and stuff like that, but you just want to say like, okay, what are the places around this? Um, and so that's just going to be another field here, and we're going to give it a name. Doesn't have any parent. It just kind of belongs to the city. Um, you can see Copilot is jumping in and doing some work here. Um, and that's not, we actually need to ask it. So um, create a numbered list of neighboring kingdoms, city-states, countries, etc. Format each. Um, and then we want to say a little bit about it. Maybe we'll say, describe each and certain number of sentences. And let's say we want to do this. Uh, we don't necessarily want to copy this one because these are foreign places. Um, we want to relations are friendly, sure, and might say uh, economic relations. What kind of things might bring it together? Political relationships, history, important. And we're going to say we expect a name description output. And we'll just say this is just what gets shown in the UI itself. And you're going to be able to have multi ones, and that should be about it. So now when I go back, it's going to reload this with the new code, and it's already going to start filling this in. So let's see what it comes up with. All right. I don't know. I definitely could use some work. I think maybe this variety of languages and cultures went too much, like Tlaxcala. I don't think this is going to be next to this city that we're in. Right. Morosia, that sounds like a good one. druid things, right? Um, so yeah, maybe we've allowed it to get a little bit too far out. And let's just see what GPT-4 comes up with. All right. Soulless Guard has neutral relationships, cautious distance, a floating city state. That's a bit much. The Forest Kingdom, that has a gothic feel to it. Um, and one thing maybe that we'd want to change, if we think about this, is this era. We might want to re-emphasize this, that even though we have different cultures and stuff, we want to have everything in that same era. Um, so doing these adjustments on the plot, on the prompts, is really important, and yeah, brings out a lot of it. Uh, yeah, that's it. I'm pretty excited about it. I'm not sure exactly what I'll do with it, but it's a lot of fun to work with. I think making cities with this is, yeah, surprisingly fun. So thanks for watching.